myself going into prison with no education, being homeless when I was a teenager, being on drugs, I had to be habilitated. I had to learn something new and apply that stuff to my life so I could be effective while I was in prison and be effective when I got out, because my mindset was 2028, I'm getting out.
Right. So let me ask you, Richard, you just alluded to it a second ago, that idea of rehabilitation, of taking you back to a healthy state.
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do, I mean, you were locked up a lot longer than I was. A lot of people have never experienced a healthy state. Would you like to just go into some of the stuff about how your childhood was, about that environment?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a small town, Apopka, Florida. My father was a vet, fought in Korea. He passed away when I was 4 years old. He was 46 years old. My mom remarried, and the man she remarried was abusive. He used to beat her. There was a lot of alcohol involved. I'm the youngest of six. Four of my older siblings were drug addicts and alcoholics themselves. I fell into that transient behavior because, you know, a child is looking for affirmation. And if you're not getting it from home, you're going to get it somewhere.
Right.
And that's what I did. So my childhood, I suffered as a victim of child abuse. I was, put out of my home, had to figure out a way to eat. And like you were saying earlier, when you were a kid, you started out stealing food.
Right.
And I'm in school because when you're in 8th grade, what else do? You go to school. And, I'm looking at the other kids and, they have clothes, they have, money, they have food. I don't have any of this.
Right.
So I got with the older crowd, and it started with a little marijuana, and then it just escalated. But you think you're in control, and you smoke a little pot, and then you're drinking, and then next thing you know, you're in the clubs, you're just doing everything. And it just led to a real unhealthy lifestyle for myself and many other people.
I mean, that's what we need to remember. You're a child, and as we know, as the court accepts, children are not the same as adults. You don't have the capacity for fully rational thought.
Right. But as a child, having to make adult choices every day, it gets hard.
Right.
It gets very convoluted in your life because you're having to do this stuff to survive. And I've always wanted to survive. And when I was arrested, the first night I was arrested, I made that conscious decision that no matter what happens, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to be a better person.
So what caused you, and this is one of the things that I find really interesting, because I had that same moment. It took me, getting out of prison and screwing up again for me to realize that and to make that decision. But what caused you at that point to make that decision?
The biggest thing with me, and I just spoke about this at another event, I was tired. I'd been, running the streets for 7-8 years, using drugs, committing crimes, selling drugs, being involved in stuff, sometimes sleeping at friends' house, sometimes having a place to live. And I was just tired. I look back on my childhood, and I was very gregarious as a kid. I always wanted to talk. I always wanted to laugh and smile, and the circumstances of my life. And I don't blame my family. I look at it, they were doing the best that they could with what they had. And I don't know all of their traumas that they went through as children, because it's generational. It gets passed down. And I had to break that chain. And I realized everything that I had done previous to that, I'd been able to slip the jab and get away with and things like that. But this, there's no sweeping this under the rug.
Right.
And I just made that choice, and I went in there and spent 3 years in the county jail, pretty much just reading and working on myself. And then when I got into the Department of Corrections, that's when I just really dug in. I spent all my time in the library, learning, teaching myself, and eventually taught myself how to invest in the stock market, trade options, wrote some books on option trading, created some strategies. And then I got into the law library and became a law clerk. And that's kind of where I found my niche. I was because most people get in the law library in prison because they want to work on their case.
Right.
I had nothing to work on, but it intrigued me to read these books and look at this and learn this. So I started started my craft and growing on that. And it definitely paid off because that's what I do for a living now.
So how long were you in the prison law library?
I worked in the actual prison law library from 2007 till 2019 when I was released early.
And so you would help other inmates file appeals, whatever type of paperwork they needed, stuff like that.
Yeah. A lot of people have a misconception about prison law libraries. They think people just come there to work on their criminal case, but
right.
You have child support issues, you have probate issues, you have people liquidating assets. And so I learned a lot of different things, but my wheelhouse was in post-conviction appellate and federal habeas corpus.
So let me ask you, how many, I know you may not know the number, but how many inmates do you think that you helped during those years at law library?
Probably a couple thousand at least.